Hey, you're watching Driver 88. Today we are taking my RS3 to have its first round of mods here at Fast Stuff with my mate Arvo. But before we do that, Arvo's asked me, would you like to play around with my Stage 2 Golf R? And I of course said yes. Why not compare it stock versus modified? So we're going to look at a bit of a power comparison, an ownership comparison, and a 0 to 100 comparison. Before we start throwing mods at this thing, we're also going to check out Fast Stuff, so please enjoy. So comparing stock forms, both cars are on the MQB platform. Both cars are model year 2023. The 0-100 time comes with the RS3 at 3.8 seconds, the Golf R at 4.8 seconds, a full 1 second faster. The Golf R is $78,600 while the RS3 is $112,000 brand new. That means that the RS3 is 43% more expensive and makes 25% more power. But of course, this Golf R is not stock, so we've added a whole suite of racing line goodies to this car. An R600 intake, a turbo inlet, a racing line intercooler, racing line alloys, including racing line sport springs. It also has a 200 cell cat and full Miltech exhaust, which brings the total to $93,600, which is still 17.8% cheaper than the RS3. Power is brought up to 448 horsepower and 530 Newton meters of torque at the crank, claimed, which means that it makes 5.8% more torque and about 11% more power than the RS3. Not to mention that it is also 100 kilos lighter than the RS3 sedan. The RS3 is running on Pirelli P0s and the Golf R is running on Falcon FK5s. Now let's take these things for a drive. So I'm going to take this thing for a little bit of a drive. The Golf R Mark 8, it's actually due for an update. So the Mark 8.5 has already just been released, but not the Golf R. I don't think we're going to see any massive mechanical changes though to the Golf R 8.5. We are apparently going to get some different buttons on here, some more traditional buttons like you have on the steering wheel in the RS3. So as we start things up, and to drive this thing daily and to live with it, I don't think you're going to be too dissimilar at all to the RS3 in hatchback form. So very similar size boot, similar size rear, as you'll see in a second, but let's just warm things up here. Instantly, I can feel that this little guy is just a bit more planted than the stock Mark 8 that I've driven before. I'll be honest, I've never driven a Stage 2 car here before. So the first thing I notice is definitely it sits a little bit, I can definitely feel that it sits a bit lower and is a little bit stiffer than my car. Feels a bit more direct on turn-in. Could have a better turning circle. Of course, both have a 7-speed DSG. I like the biggest difference that I think you're going to find where you get your money's worth is the fact that this car just picks up acceleration, especially when you're, say, just driving around suburbia or, say, merging or whatever and you don't want to have to change your modes, is that it just picks up power so much quicker than the RS3. I hate the normal driving mode in my RS3. The throttle mapping is just set or tuned for fuel consumption and the lowest emissions possible. Whereas this guy is just a lot more entertaining day to day to drive. You can always put the RS3 in sport mode and RS mode, but again, that's also not always like the Goldilocks mode. One thing I do also like is these aftermarket paddles. They're just a little bit longer, but they don't feel cheap and they feel pretty much
like a stock paddle should be. So that's something also that I'm adding to my RS3 in the coming weeks. One thing I will say about the sound is it's subjective as to whether you like this sort of turbo whoosh of this E888 or the 5-cylinder. One thing that I can tell you now, that this modified example sounds better than my car, because my car is so goddamn quiet now with these OPFs. Something is required. I have to get mid pipes or something, because I can barely hear my car at all, even in these sport modes. See, a stage 2 sort of car, and I hate to use the word stage, but basically a few bolt-ons without changing the turbo is really the right way to go in Australia, because we just don't have the roads to exploit a 500 horsepower at the wheels Golf R. By the time you're enjoying it, you're just not able to, because you don't have an autobahn essentially. I do like the gear shifts. Nice instant torque in the Golf R. Merging is just effortless. You've got this nice little rumble from the Gen 4 E888, and once you get into about 4,000 revs, finally you can hear that exhaust, and it's got a nice little growl to it, as you can hear. Yeah, it's moments like these that of course you just wish I was on the Autobahn, basically. Let's see if we can test out this 0 to 100 claim, stock 4.8 seconds. What will we get at stage 2? Man, mid-range and response is so good. So very good. These mods are definitely worth it. I mean, maybe not all of them, maybe you don't need a full cat back, but all in all, so strong, these Gen 4 engines, just like my Leon Cupra, which I got like 100 horsepower out of similar sort of mods without the downpipe.
Lastly, I need to mention that this Golf R is running a Racing Line software stage 2 tune on a low torque map. And the reason why is these latest cars don't yet have a full TCU tune available. If that was the case, it could run all the way up to 580 Newton meters, which again is 15% or more than the RS3.
So the RS3. Now I'm going to try not to be too biased, because of course this is my personal car. The first thing I will say is that I kind of prefer the way that this thing handles the road in general across broken road and everyday driving. The springs, as I go over a speed bump, the springs are relatively harsh, I guess, on the Golf R. The thing that I don't like the most just happened then about this RS3, and that is in the drive mode. It's obviously got a throttle mapping that is tuned for maximum fuel efficiency, and it's quite frustrating. You can be going through a slip lane onto the freeway, or just kind of pulling off a road when you're behind traffic, and it's like nothing, and then all the power. It's not lag, it's just tuning, and that's something I guess I want to fix. Now, when you press the RS button twice, it's perfectly fine. You've got power everywhere. As I do so now, you've got power everywhere. The 7-speed DSG keeps you in the power at all times. Unfortunately, we do have some false noises put into the cabin, but it does sound quite good. 60 rolling, the performance feels very similar to the Golf R. It's after 100 that I think that extra torque and less weight you feel in the Golf R. And I think it'll be quite an interesting rolling race from 60 to 200 kilometers per hour. I really like the way this thing gets about its business. Both cars now have a proper diff, so they're not the VAG products of old that just basically understeer to eternity. Yeah, I really like the way this thing handles now. Nice and flat. Lots of power on torque, rather. Just a good amount of power at all times. You know, and having a decent amount of time with these guys back to back, I can say that just like my Cupra Leon VZX, the E8 888 Gen 4 is so strong with that Continental turbo. There's so much torque, and it's incredible how much performance you get from a 4-cylinder. One other little note is that in R mode with the Golf R, I find that the steering is too artificially heavy. Both cars obviously don't have a lot of steering feel, but just having things heavy doesn't really make it more satisfying to drive. Lastly, when I put everything all together, of course I would still prefer an RS3, even in stock form, because I think it does just satisfy me a bit more with that 5-pot turbo and the styling of the sedan. That's all subjective though. But in driving the Racing Line Performance Golf R from Fast Stuff, it just makes you realize that this needs a mid-pipe or something. I don't know how much of a difference a catback will make with an OPF on this car, but it needs at least some sort of tune and a mid-pipe. And that, of course, is what's coming next.
So now that I've had a bit of a drive in the Golf R, I tell you, I prefer the steering wheel of my RS3. I kind of prefer, I guess, the look of the screens on the Golf R. Of course, I know everyone complains about it, but I'm not a big fan of the buttons, in particular the buttons here. Otherwise, these interiors are very similar. Soft sort of dash, carbon trim, similar sort of stuff down here, double cup holders. Now these seats, they are a little bit more aggressive in the Golf R, believe it or not, than the RS3. We've got better side bolstering. They're a little bit harder. And I think it's kind of subjective as to which you would prefer. So boot size comparison. It's my Panama hat when I'm in Panama. So we've got an even cheery elbow, and hilariously, I've just taken the risk and hope that this connects to the integrated engineering intake. I hope it does, but maybe we could have to forge something ourselves to make it work. So this is our integrated engineering intake kit. Ooh, shiny. We've also got a piping kit as well coming. So we just managed 3.69 seconds in the RS3, which is pretty impressive given that the claim figure is 3.8. I've seen people even go significantly faster than that with a stock car. I think it's testament to the TCU tune on the latest RS3. I've seen IROS Motorsport get into the 8s still with a stock TCU tune, so they've definitely done something right with the RS3. But stay tuned for more parts coming.